Good morning everyone, and welcome to Colman's review. This Friday morning we are just going to do a couple of different things. This being the August bank holiday weekend, normally we'd be in high alert for the oncoming Celtic Music Festival, and unfortunately due to circumstances, of course, it has to be cancelled, which leads me into the first thing I have to mention. Obviously over the next couple of days normally we'd have been treated to an absolute festival of music, but this year something completely different, and with respect to the circumstances, the local Celtic Music Festival have made available from this evening a concert. It's Gavin Ring, and he's performing behind here and in the Holy Cross Abbey, and the concert was recorded by Christy Reardon, my cameraman of CR Videos, and it was recorded in conjunction with the RTE Orchestra, and that concert is available, and I guarantee you a treat in store is available from this evening, and the link will be available on my Facebook page from 7:30 this evening. So something for you to look forward to. I know not the same, but and a big thank you to the Celtic Music Festival for making this available to us. Now, the second thing I'd like to mention is, and something completely different, two local men were involved in a fundraising project in the last couple of days. So that's Aidan and Colin Walsh, and 6 cyclists cycled from Dublin to Carsveen. They actually finished their undertaking yesterday evening, so well done to all involved, but a special well done to both Aidan and Colin, and they did it as a fundraising project on behalf of Massey. That's the charity that is set up to work on behalf of the asylum seekers in this country. So again, well done to our two local men, Colin and Aidan Walsh. This morning I'm delighted to have June O Connell. Apologies again, June, you'll forgive me, I have a terrible time with names, and I know O'Connell is not your married name, but
it is my only name.
It's your only name. Okay, very good. So we have June O'Connell, and many of you will know June. June is involved with the Skellig 618 project. Actual fact, June, to start this off, because there'll be many viewers out there who may not know you. So just a brief background of you. Yes.
I'm one of the Andys, one of the O'Connell Andys from Carsveen. My father would have been born in Bornashroda. I was born and reared in this town. I have been away for a number of years and working very hard to come back. I suppose I would have spent the last 14 years working here every summer at a time when, and Easter and Christmas, when remote working wasn't a thing. When I started, it was called lying, where you had to say to people, I'd love to meet you in Dublin on that. It's just I'm just out of Dublin that day, when I'd be taking my kids swimming lessons to Cooscrown or Kells or whatever. So delighted to be home. My parents still live here, my brothers still live in Kerry, and my 3 sisters are up and down a lot, so we're very tied to Carsveen. I'm an absolute townie through and through, and delighted to be so.
Very good. Thank you for that. So this morning we're talking about this book, Colm McCann, and it's a paragon, and a novel. And interesting enough, our timing, which was completely by mistake, is that earlier this week a paragon was actually nominated for the long list for the Man Booker Prize, which is indeed a great boost for the book, and apparently he's in with a good shout for it.
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, June, can you give us a little bit of background on the story and very much how you enjoyed it or did not enjoy it?
Yeah. Well, I've read 2 of Colm McCann's books before. So I read Let the Great World Spin, and I read Transatlantic. I did try reading a few of the others, but they just didn't grab me. But I might go back to them. So you recommended this book to me as I was browsing the shelves here one day. And I never read historical novels. I find they just don't grab me as a story. I like to read stories with a start, a middle and an end. I don't mind if the end is at the start or the middle is at the end. I don't mind, but I like it to be a story. I read for relaxation. I think for many years in my previous career, before I was in the distilling business, I read for a living, and it kind of took a lot of the pleasure out of reading, so it needed to be a good story to grab you. So this is a good story, and it happens to be in a historical context. So basically it's a story, based on a true story, and Colman McCann did speak to the two men who are the two protagonists. One is a Palestinian Muslim named Bassam, and one is a Jewish Israeli named Rami. And essentially the story is around them and how they came, their lives basically, because they ended up having an awful lot in common, which you wouldn't imagine, but both of their daughters died in the conflict in Israel. A little 10-year-old called Amir, I think, was the little Muslim girl, and a 13-year-old teenager in a city in Israel was Rami's daughter who died.
And I think that was a suicide bombing, was it?
It was a suicide bombing.
Yeah.
And I like the way that the novel is laid out, because it's really, really short chapters, and some of them are one line long. That's all. You know, I'm opening this here now, and one of the paragraphs here, which is a chapter, is 4 sentences long. 1 sentence long, 4 lines, and the other one is 1 line long. And it was great to keep the interest, because it would hop over and back between both of their perspectives. And there's also a really interesting kind of theme running through the book, which the cover maybe gives it a hint about birds. And he talks an awful lot about migratory birds. And I suppose, considering where we are here, and migratory birds are so much part of our year on year, we mark the year, you know. We now know the puffins are leaving us for another 10 months. You know, the guillemots are flying around the back of Dole's Head, and probably Bolus Head. So the birds are really interesting when things get a little bit too heavy, maybe. The next thing he switches to a story about maybe when Rami was younger and the migratory birds were going over his head. And it was almost like from 30,000 feet, the birds are getting on with their business while all this is going on, and have done so for millennia, while all this is going on the ground. So us as humans, the birds have seen this come and go, and we have to figure a way out of it. So I didn't know what a paragon meant when I picked up the book, and you only find out towards the end of the book. But I think it's now that he's listed in the long list for the Man Booker, it will be mentioned in dispatches. So and a paragon is a mathematical expression for a shape with infinite number of sides. So a hexagon, a square has 4, a hexagon has 6, I think. But now that I know that, I think, you know, what the title might mean is, no matter what the story is, there's many, 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 many sides. And this story is just told from 2 perspectives. And the birds, if you count those, which is a very interesting kind of perspective as well. So it was I just thought the way it was written, because it's a big book and it would be hard to dip in and out of, I think, if it wasn't written in that format. But it was very gripping.
And again, and I think we've made reference to this before with All the Light We Cannot See, and that's lovely where the short chapter is being used.
Yes.
And when you're dealing with 2 characters, that it's a great technique, but very difficult to do, because you're bouncing back and forwards in 2 people's lives, but you're also trying to keep the string of the story going. So it's wonderful. The short chapter really does, because you're being taken away from the other character, but you're not being taken away for too long.
No.
And then he brings you back again, so therefore, all right, and then you're back into the story again, and obviously, but very much obviously centering on the conflict in Palestine.
Yes.
And And would you say, like, is there kind of an underlying theme? Obviously, the Paragon analogy, the fact that it's a conflict that has so many sides and it's very convoluted, and I suppose given the fact that this has gone on for decades, and the longer it goes on, the more complex and it has become. Would you say it's about compassion and
Empathy.
empathy? Okay.
Yeah, that you have to see someone else's perspective and walk in their shoes. And I know that's easy, we all say that. And we all mean to do it. Nobody gets up in the morning and says, you know what I'm going to do now today? I'm not going to be empathetic. That's a great idea, I'll do that today, right? Nobody does that, I think, but it's hard to actually access it. And we're really lucky here. I've lived in a city for most of my adult life, and I think when you live in a city, there are a lot of people, and I often say to my own children is that you might know this many people, but they're all the same. And I might know this many people growing up, but they were all very different. And you were in each other's lives, so you actually knew a lot about each other. So to try and practice that in our lives as adults where we have influence now, it's actually very hard because you're so busy just living your life, you know. So even if it's to read it in a book to remind yourself of it, it's probably no harm. And it's not a preachy book. This is a yarn, this is a story. You know, I suppose I thought a little bit more deeply about it because I knew I'd be talking to you about it today. And I don't always think deeply about books. I read them, I enjoy them, I say, God, that was great. And if I remember 5 or 6 things about them, you know, maybe years later, I'm delighted with that. But I think what I really liked about this as well is that I typically don't like reading historical novels. I find them difficult, and I feel like it's like school. I feel like I'm trying to remember dates, and I'm trying to remember who was in charge of what and what was the period, and while this was going on in France, what was going on in America or England at the same time, or Ireland. And this was an easy way, and I'm sure he didn't intend it like this, but and there's a risk always when you're reading a novel to get your history. But if you trust a writer like Colman McCann, who will have done his homework, and he's telling a true story, so when he's talking about these men's lives, it was in the context they were actually in. So it was interesting to learn more about the history of the region, even though that wasn't the main point of the book. In me reading the book, it might be the main point of others reading the book. It wasn't for me. And it's kind of encouraged me to think, maybe that's a way I could become more au fait with other parts of the world. But the other thing that struck me was, Colman, if we all learnt our history through people's stories, and I know history is stories, and there's a big debate over history, her story, because it is whoever is the victor gets to write history. But even that expression, that means there was a war, you know, the victor, or whoever turned out to be the most dominant. But, you know, it's a bit objective, isn't it, the way we tell ourselves and our children our history. We talk about it as dates and facts and events. And I live near the Paupers Road out here in Bordway, and for the lockdown it was our 2 kilometre and then our 5 kilometre kind of walk. And I often wondered how many people walked up that road during the famine and what they were feeling, you know. So, you know, maybe I know the Leaving Cert and the Junior Certs are changing, but this kind of a book, you know.
I think what you're saying is it kind of humanises history. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You know, instead of just facts and figures and dates and, you know, because history doesn't happen in a vacuum. It happens because somebody felt strongly enough about something for whatever reason to do something that changed the course of history. But it's just a good yarn, you know.
Good, good. I'll finish with the question I always ask. What would you give it out of 10?
I'll nearly read it again now after thinking about it so deeply. I mean, for me, I'd give it a 9 out of 10 because it gripped me, you know, and it was easy to read. I don't often get 2 hours to sit down and indulge in reading a book, so when you pick it up, sometimes I've left books behind me because I've forgotten, because it's been 3 or 4 days since I've read it and I can't figure out where I was in it. So I think now that I think a little bit more deeply about this, it's a very important book. And his writing is beautiful. But it's so beautiful you don't notice how beautiful it is, it just flows. So yeah, I would give it a 9 out of 10, and every good luck and to him, and he's a great storyteller.
That's great. Don't we have, isn't it wonderful as a race, Irish people have a wonderful tradition for being good storytellers.
We didn't bring it from the bushes, Colman. I mean, you know, we didn't lick it off the roads. No, it is.
It's great.
Yeah.
It's great. June, thank you very much. Absolutely insightful. Thank you very much. Okay, so there you have it. Colin McCann's A Paragon. And thank you again to June for a wonderful review. And before I sign off, just a quick reminder again, the Gavin Rain concert will be available on the Facebook page from 7:30 this evening. Okay, have a wonderful weekend and please keep safe. Bye bye.